Hello and welcome to Mythic Mind, where we pursue wisdom on the paths between primary and secondary worlds. I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I'm glad that you're here. Hey there, welcome back. Today was originally supposed to be another book club episode as we worked through Augustine's Confessions, but we had to delay the most recent scheduled meeting for that because, well, I mean, it was scheduled on Memorial Day. That's just kind of how our regular rhythm was running, and it just didn't really work out scheduling wise. And so we decided to postpone that one. And so instead, I thought that this would be a good opportunity to provide you with some updates regarding what's happening in Mythic Mind because, well, there's a lot happening in Mythic Mind, a lot of developments, a lot of things that are moving behind the scenes, and I wanted to let you know a little bit about kind of what is going on here. Obviously, we have so many interests. I have so many personal interests. Everything is so interesting, which makes things kind of difficult to stay on a singular path. But I don't really call myself a scholar in any particular field. Now, I mean, there's certainly some things that I know more about than others. There's certain fields that I definitely know more about than most people. Just as I'm sure there are things that you know about that you know more about than most people do. And so, I have the things that I tend to focus on, but I'm very much a generalist in that I like to read and study, well, everything, but especially within the realm of the humanities, history, philosophy, theology, political science, whatever, literature, obviously. And so I really believe that all of these fields ultimately they're connected to what it means to be human. And what it means to be human is directly tied to how we're put together, why we're put together, and what we are for, or rather who we are for. And that's really what I mean when I talk about approaching things from a Christian humanities perspective. That we have within this fellowship, we have within my own interest in kind of the areas that I'm working in, we have a vast array of pursuits that relate to the humanities in general, literature, philosophy, government, et cetera, storytelling in various forms. But these aren't really separate branches in that they all find their unity. All knowledge, especially knowledge about what it means to be human, all these discordant elements, or apparently discordant elements, they find their unity in the Logos of God. And so even when we're moving in different directions, at least ideally, we're ultimately moving in one direction. Right? I mean, you could think about Sauron. When he breaks the white light, instead of being Sauron the White, he decides to become Sauron of many colors. And he has that exchange with Gandalf, and Gandalf says that he prefers white. And that's because white is the unity from which all the other colors of light spring. You could picture a white beam of light hitting a prism and then refracting out into the various elements that as they move further away from that point of unity, they move further and further apart. Well, that's the path of corruption, right? That's the path of degradation of meaning and even of our meaning. Whereas the path of sanctification, the path of putting things back into proper order means that we recognize all of these different rays of light representing different aspects of the light spectrum. And obviously, like red is not green, right? However, as you better understand what red is, better understand what green is, you're actually going to move closer and closer and closer to that point of unity on the other side of the prism. And so that's what it means. That's what I mean when I talk about taking a Christian humanities perspective. We look at all the different domains of knowledge regarding things like what it means to be human. And as we look at all these different areas of specialization, we're doing so in a way that actually moves closer and closer and closer to a point of unity. And in turn, we aspire to look from that point of unity in seeing the unity behind all fields of knowledge. And so you may notice that even just within the podcast, let alone the larger fellowship, but just within the main Mythic Mind podcast, we've been branching out a little bit more. We started off with philosophy back at the very beginning as I went through some things on Soren Kierkegaard, especially looking at the concept of anxiety and sickness unto death. Then we really moved into a Tolkien, Lewis focus for a while. We've done some Beowulf. We've done some Norse mythology and legends. We're currently doing a book study on Augustine's Confessions, but we're also doing some Star Wars stuff, like with movies and with video games. And even though all of these things are they're obviously somewhat different, or it's a matter of different focus, that our orientation is meant to point all of what we do in the same direction. Whether we're engaging with literature, whether we're engaging with storytelling in various forms, and movies and video games and shows, whether we're dealing with philosophy, whether we're dealing with the life and theology of St. Augustine, our intention is to bring all of these in a common direction, while also just experiencing the joy of good fellowship around important ideas, and just fun mediums. Not everything has to be super serious. And in fact, if you take the most serious things seriously, then everything actually gains a certain degree of levity. As G.K. Chesterton said, angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. I think that there's actually something fairly profound about that. I mean, I don't know if I would take that as like metaphysically accurate. I mean, I don't know, but I think that the point that he's making is valid. I think it's significant. But at the same time, like I recognize that not everybody who engages with Mythic Mind is going to enjoy or is going to naturally connect with everything that we're doing. And so that's why we're branching off into some separate podcasts. For now, the plan is this show right here is going to be our main hub and is going to take maintain a mostly literary kind of focus. But we recently launched our first Splinter show, which is called Mythic Mind Games, which deals with, how do we take a Christian humanities perspective to the medium of video games, especially with storytelling and various other ways that video games might engage with us. And you can, I mean, as far as my defense of what we're doing there, you can go over to the Mythic Mind Games podcast, listen to the first episode. I get into a little bit of that. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that everyone has to play video games or even that video games are good for everybody, right? Like if you're honest with yourself, you know what's going to be upbuilding to you and what's not. But I'm convinced that there actually is a lot of potential there for video games to engage with people with significant topics when the writing is good. In a way that appeals to a popular audience. And taking important ideas to a popular audience, and I don't mean that in a disparaging term at all. I simply mean, people who haven't necessarily actively studied philosophy, that I think that that is actually very significant. I mean, looking back at my own life, as a kid, as a teenager, I didn't read nearly as much as I wish that I did looking back. But games provided a kind of popular level storytelling vehicle for me. And that is actually significant, more significant than I even realized at the time, in the way that certain stories, certain worlds, certain aesthetics influence my imagination, influence the way that I view the world, generally for the better. And I think that if that's done intentionally, it can actually be something really powerful. And so that's why we splintered off into this Mythic Mind Games podcast. Now, there is already in the very near future going to be a third Mythic Mind podcast coming up. And that's going to come out of our Star Wars series. And so, in what I believe is going to be our next episode, we're going to have our discussion of A New Hope. As we work through all the Star Wars movies, and maybe we do some other things along the way. And we've already done Knights of the Old Republic, partially here, partially over on the Games podcast. But maybe we'll do some shows, maybe we'll do some other things. I'm not really sure where this is going to lead, but we're at the very least going to go through all the movies, beginning with the original trilogy, beginning with A New Hope. Now, after the episode on A New Hope, we're going to splinter off to a Mythic Mind movies and shows podcast, where we're going to continue with our Star Wars series, and then after that, we'll go on to other movies and other shows, dealing with kind of like the games podcast, dealing with storytelling in more of a popular level than books. I mean, I wish books were more popular, but to be fair, I mean, movies and games actually do, I believe, have their own value that I wouldn't say surpasses books by any means, but it is different than books and it can have certain benefits of its own. And so that'll be our third podcast that's coming up soon. So obviously, there's a lot going on with Mythic Mind Fellowship, not to mention even some other things that are happening behind the scene. We have our ongoing Discord conversations for patrons. We have 3 courses that are running right now. I'm running a philosophy course, a history of ideas course. We've got Josh Traylor's course on Paradise Lost and Hannah Gilmore's course on Introductory Latin. And so we have so much happening here. And as far as the podcast goes, all of these different podcast avenues right now are really becoming increasingly community events. But obviously, I'm taking a leading role in making all of them happen. Eventually, I might hand off the reins on that. But for now, I'm obviously doing a lot. And the reason for that is because I believe in what we're doing. As somebody who has experiences teaching with Christian universities as well as state universities, I have a strong heart for the humanities, and specifically the Christian humanities, despite the fact that institutional humanities are largely off the rails. They're shells of what they once were. They've been plagued by the forces of deconstructionism and radical postmodernism to the point where nothing really means anything anymore, which is why I find it so refreshing to deal with the pre-moderns. Like, for example, in our Brief History of Ideas course, we just wrapped up a unit on Aristotle, and specifically looking at his Nicomachean Ethics in Book Two, near the beginning of Book Two of the Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle makes the point that in our study of ethics, our goal is not to know more about ethics, to like establish a well-articulated ethical theory. I mean, hopefully we can do that, but that's not the point. He says that the point of pursuing ethics is to be good. And that right there is a strong contrast to what you find today, where if you were to tell somebody in any kind of academic setting, like my goal is to be good, then assuming they took you seriously at all, people would immediately start to like kind of get on edge. Like, wait, you actually believe there's something like goodness? And if it's evident, that's what you mean by goodness, not just like your subjective goodness, but like what is actually good? Well, that's going to, well, it's gonna it's gonna get some pushback to say the least. Whereas you read the pre-moderns, you read Plato, you read Aristotle, and it's very clear that, when they talk about engaging in philosophy, they actually mean the love of wisdom. To be a good philosopher isn't just to think well, although you should think well along the way. And if you're being a good philosopher, like you will think well. But the main purpose of philosophy is to better love wisdom. And love is something that shapes your soul. It's not just something you do in your speculation, in your abstraction. It's something that you are concretely. It's what Lewis talks about when he says that these people who deny truth, who step outside of natural law, that they're men without chest because they have nothing to be. Their heart has been removed voluntarily. And so I think that it's very important that we regain a substantial and a substantially Christian way of understanding what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to engage with stories, to engage with reason as we relate to the divine reason by which we reason? As the Psalms say, in his light do we see light. And I think that it's important that we recover that, not just in the institutionally academic world, but even in just the popular understanding. Like people today need to be reminded of what it means to be human, especially as we are lost in this postmodern hypersubjectivist philosophy, coupled with the rise of AI, as people are writing books produced by AI and then reading AI summaries of the books, like working in with college students, like AI is just it's a major problem. Like, don't get me wrong, I get that there can be certain targeted benefits of using AI, but as far as outsourcing our entire thought process to artificial intelligence, like this is a major existential human crisis regarding what it means to be human. And this is exactly why I very much enjoy doing this sort of work outside of formal academia, because when I or another member of our fellowship is teaching a course, when people enroll in that course, it's because they're doing so voluntarily, because they recognize the value of wisdom and they recognize the value of education. They recognize the value of reading good books and engaging with significant ideas so that they in turn can be the more grounded people, that they can be more substantial people, equipped to engage with the phantoms of our time. I know that that's why I like to read good books. That's why I like to engage in important and significant storytelling. It's why I like to fellowship with the people in this Mythic Mind community, because it makes me more grounded. That as I look to significant things, I in turn start to live more significantly. I don't just want to know what ethics is. I want to be good as my thought patterns and as my life patterns conform to the Logos of God. So, with all of that being said, and with all the different directions that I'm moving and that we're moving as a fellowship, it really is my desire to eventually get to the point where I can do this sort of thing full time. That I can, as a real person, can engage with real people regarding real and significant ideas and stories and enchantment, right? The right kind of enchantment that helps us to recognize the wonder of this life, this reality that we live in, upheld by the being and the will of God. And again, as Chesterton says, that we aren't for lack of wonders, we're only for lack of wonder. Or as Thomas Aquinas says, with all the efforts of the human mind, cannot exhaust the essence of a single fly. When you recognize like how deep and magnificent the smallest grain of this reality is, the more that you are going to be enchanted with wonder, and you're going to have reverence toward the glory that is beneath all things. And so, if you would like to help me continue to develop what we're doing here, to offer more of it. I would love to for all these podcasts we're doing to happen once a week, which is just not tenable right now with all my other work obligations. But I would love for all these podcasts to be once a week. I have more that I want to spin off. I would love to spin off one that's just devoted to fiction, one that's just devoted to philosophy. There are a lot of different things that I want to spin off here. There are a lot of courses that I want to be able to offer. A lot of ways that I would like for us to just continue to go further up and further into these great things that we are moving toward. But here's the thing. Right now, I have to teach a lot. I have the sole income for our family of five, and that's it's not always easy. And so I have to teach a lot in order to pay all the bills and kind of get us where we need to be financially. And so if I'm going to continue at the pace I'm currently going, let alone continue to go further, I'm really going to need your support. And so if you believe in what we're doing, if you want to see a vibrant, strong Christian humanities fellowship flourish and leave a lasting impact on this world around us, this world that's desperate for the hope of a capital R reality, then the number one way you can help me is go over to patreon.com/mythicmind and become a patron. Whether you can only throw $5 a month our way, or you're able to do substantially more than that, every financial contribution helps to bring me closer to a point where I can start to pare down some of my other work, some of my institutional work, and do more of this. And if you sign on as a tier 3 annual patron, then you'll get just about everything we have to offer here. You'll get access to any of my courses that begin within that year's term. And so right now, that would be Plato, Stoicism Until We Have Faces, the Elder Scrolls and Philosophy, and then at the beginning of 2026, we have the Silmarillion. There may be another course after that within this term, I'm not sure, but at the very least, you'll have those 3 courses. Also, any level of patronage will give you early and ad-free episodes of all of our podcasts, all delivered into a singular patron feed, as well as full Discord access. So again, Patreon is going to be a great way to be able to support me on a regular basis. Also, you can find in the show notes, in addition to that Patreon link, you can find a Buy Me a Coffee link. If you don't want to become a recurring patron, but you do want to support me with a one-time donation, kind of like a tip, then you can use that Buy Me a Coffee link and leave a tip for whatever it is that you are interested in and able to provide. Any bit of support is appreciated. And things I really don't have a problem asking for money on a fairly regular basis, and that's only because I believe in what we're doing. And I want us to be able to do more of it. And not only is it something that I enjoy, even though I very much enjoy it, and as do I believe our patrons. Right now we've got over 50 patrons, and several of which are deeply invested. You've heard them on a number of different podcast episodes, and there are a number of others that are involved a little bit more behind the scenes. But this is a rich community, and I very much enjoy our work. But I enjoy it precisely because it's significant. There's nothing quite like growing as a fellowship around significant things. And so again, patreon.com/mythicmind or that Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes is going to be really helpful in helping us move closer toward our goals that will allow us to have more frequent podcasts, more podcasts, more events, more videos, all sorts of things that we would love to do. Again, if I could afford the time to do it. And so hopefully you can help me afford some of that time. All right. Well, that's where we will end for now. Next time on this podcast, we'll be discussing A New Hope. And over on the Games podcast, next time, we'll be finishing up our Star Wars Old Republic series. But that's it for now. Until next time, Godspeed. I have always, at least ever since I can remember, had a kind of longing for death. It was when I was happiest that I longed most. It was on happy days when we were up in the hills, the three of us, with the wind and the sunshine, where you couldn't see Gloam or the palace. Do you remember? The color and the smell, and looking across at the gray mountain in the distance. And because it was so beautiful, it set me longing, always longing. Somewhere else there must be more of it. Everything seemed to be saying, Psyche, come. But I couldn't come, and I didn't know where I was to come to. It almost hurt me. I felt like a bird in a cage when the other birds of its kind are flying home. And now I will make answer to you, O my judges, and show that he who has lived as a true philosopher has reason to be of good cheer when he is about to die, and that after death he may hope to receive the greatest good in the other world. For I deem that the true disciple of philosophy is likely to be misunderstood by other men. They do not perceive that he is ever pursuing death and dying. And if this is true, why, having had the desire of death all his life long, should he regret the arrival of that which he has always been pursuing and desiring? The longing of Plato and the control of the Stoics pervades Lewis's retelling of the Cupid and Psyche myth until we have faces. With this incredible novel, which he believed to be his best, Lewis demonstrates the tensions in ancient thought and, even more significantly, the limits of rational philosophy, which can only go as deep as the foxes can dig. Beyond that, under that, and providing the life of that thought, we find the dark and holy places that blind our faculties of reason. What then shall we do? This is a topic that we will explore after first surveying some important philosophical contributions in the ancient world that have had some significant bearing on Lewis's great novel. To this end, we will begin with Plato's Phaedo, which discusses the immortality of the soul and what those who love wisdom might expect in the life to come. And then we will spend 4 weeks with some of the great Stoics, including Epictetus, Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca. Finally, we will turn our attention to Till We Have Faces for the final 2 weeks with original content, and so this will not be the same as what you may have seen in the Fiction and Philosophy of C.S. Lewis course. Each week of this 8-week study will include readings from primary sources that will be provided as PDFs, although these are all texts that belong in your personal library. You'll be provided with recommendations for secondary readings, you'll have recorded presentations for you to watch at your leisure, ongoing Discord chats, and weekly live meetings to discuss the readings. Enroll today by going to patreon.com/mythicmind and checking out the shop, or you can gain access to all courses, past, present, and future this year by purchasing a Tier 3 annual subscription. I hope to see you there.